I always loved hearing my grandfather's stories. He wasn't like other old men who sat in silence, eyes fixed on nothing as if haunted by their past. No, he spoke freely, sometimes cheerfully, about his time as a London bobby during the war. Tales of blackouts, air raids, and the strange camaraderie of people holding it together under fire. Those stories felt like small pieces of history passed down just for me. But there was one story he only told me once. We were sitting by the fireplace one winter evening when I was maybe 15. My grandfather, Thomas Hadley, was unusually quiet that night. I thought it was because the storm outside rattled the windows in a way that probably reminded him of the Blitz. But as he stared into the flames, his brow furrowed, I asked him about his strangest night on the job. He looked at me, his face lined with a seriousness I hadn't seen before, and said softly, "Do you really want to know?" Of course I did. It was early 1942, he began. The nights were pitch black in London during the war. You couldn't show so much as a candle without worrying about the Luftwaffe spotting it from above. Those were hard times, lad. You'd walk through streets that felt empty of life, but full of something else. Something you could feel on your skin. He paused, as if hearing something faint but persistent. Then he continued. On one of those black nights, I was on my usual beat in Whitechapel. It wasn't uncommon to come across drunks, squatters, or looters during the blackouts, and my torch, what we called a flashlight, was little help. It barely cut a few feet into the fog and darkness, so you learned to listen as much as look. That night I heard a whistle. Not like a bird or a man calling for a cab. No, it was slow, long, reedy. It came from an alleyway I'd passed 100 times before. I thought maybe it was some poor soul trying to get my attention. People got hurt all the time stumbling in the dark or worse. Grandfather leaned forward, his knuckles whitening on the arm of his chair. When I stepped into the alley, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. London's never truly silent, even during a blackout. There's always the sound of distant bombs, planes, or something moving. But not there. The sound of my boots echoed unnaturally against the brick walls. I remember shining my torch ahead, catching the faint outline of rubbish and old crates. Nothing unusual. Then I saw it. He paused, swallowing hard, his Adam's apple bobbing. At first, I thought it was a man, someone tall, thin, standing perfectly still against the far wall. I only caught him for a second in the torchlight before my battery sputtered, and the darkness swallowed him again. I called out to him, "London police, are you hurt?" But he didn't answer. Then I heard that whistle again. It was right in front of me now, though I couldn't see a thing. The kind of sound that makes the hairs on your neck stand up. It wasn't just a whistle, it was wrong, off kilter, like it came from a throat that wasn't shaped right. At this point, I was hanging on his every word. My grandfather was an honest man, but something about the way he told this story, it felt different. "What did you do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I took a step back," he said. "I don't mind telling you, I was frightened." I turned my torch on again, but this time I aimed it low at the ground. And that's when I saw them feet, not boots or shoes. Feet, pale, bare, twisted like they didn't know how to stand properly. The toes curled wrong, long and thin, like fingers. I couldn't see much more before the torch flickered out again. I spun around and marched out of that alley faster than I cared to admit. I didn't run, that wasn't what a bobby did, but I knew better than to linger. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, some twist that would ease the tension gnawing at the pit of my stomach. But there wasn't one. What happened after that? His eyes locked on mine, and he said softly, "I passed that alley twice more that night. The first time it was silent. The second time, just before dawn, I saw a man step out of it. Not the same man. This one wore an old soldier's coat, his face grey with soot. He looked at me and said, 'I wouldn't go down there, mate. They've been waiting.' Then he walked off, whistling the same reedy tune I'd heard before. The fire crackled in the silence that followed. My grandfather sat back, looking tired, older than he had a moment before. "Did you ever go back?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "No," he said, "and I never asked anyone about it either. Some things, lad, you leave be. Whatever was in that alley, it wasn't meant for us to see." Years later, after he passed, I visited London on a trip. Out of morbid curiosity, I decided to find that alley in Whitechapel. It wasn't hard. It still looked as he'd described it. narrow, unmarked, wedged between two old buildings. It was broad daylight, yet as I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that the shadows clung too tightly to the bricks. I listened, though I didn't hear anything. No whistle, no footsteps. But as I turned to leave, something cold brushed against the back of my neck. I spun around, and for the briefest moment, just out of the corner of my eye, I thought I saw someone standing there. Someone tall, thin, watching. And in the quiet of that bright London street, I swear I heard a whistle.